jump over to AWS
Yes,
on some of those certifications.
absolutely.
Like what do you think over there? Do they mirror what you think is the
It's a little bit different. For me, AWS has two paths,
Mhm.
whereas Azure has three. I see from DevOps development and SysOps and the DevOps, or so infrastructure, DevOps, and development. Azure has three. AWS has two, because they treat developers and DevOps engineers as the same.
Mm.
And so they've consolidated both those paths into one, whereas Azure split them out. It still goes down the same, I'm going to say the same rabbit hole, which is gets you to a point where they do have a database specialization, large scale data specialization. They have a networking specialization. They have a security specialization. They have like Lambda function specification. So they have all these little specification or like specializations that happen after you prove that second tier knowledge, what I call that 300 level knowledge, right? So you get your associate certificates, you get your professional certificates, and then you get your specializations on top of that. You don't have to do it that way actually anymore. You used to have to be able to prove that you had the associate level before you could get to the pro, and before you could get to the pro, you had to go to the pro before you could get to the specialized ones. Now you can kind of jump a little bit. I have some opinions on that, but that's for another conversation. But the idea, I think, based off of industry trends, is close to the same as what we talked about with Azure. I joke about it. There's a few exams. There's a handful of exams I've ever failed, and I thankfully, like it's a horrible superpower to have, but I take tests well. It works great for when you're a senior in high school and you walk into the ACT or SAT. It works great if you're a 40-something technology professional and taking certificates, or taking exams for certificates. It works great, but I would much rather like the ability to fly home or something like that as a superpower. But unfortunately, when you look at it, I kind of try and figure out where does it fit. The AWS Pro Architect Exam is one of the few exams I've ever failed. I think I've failed 7 exams in my life. AWS Pro Architect Exam is one of the few exams I've ever failed. And it's hard because it does make you think in multiple dimensions. It's not just architecture. It's architecture on top of cost evaluation, on top of security considerations, and there's this multiple dimensions of thought. And the answers that they give you, 3 of them might work correctly. The trick is which one meets there's one sentence, and I'd like to talk about this later, but it's like, how do I take this exam? You have to be able to identify what the questions are really asking. And I have 4 kids. I think I've mentioned this before. I have 4 kids, and I help a lot with story problems. They're all now in college, so I don't have to help with story problems as much as I used to. But it's the same basic critical thinking that you look at when you look at story problems in math, which is, Aaron has 3 apples and 2 oranges, and how many total fruit does Aaron have, right? You have to be able to say, well, what are they asking? And understand how many total fruit does Aaron have. Okay, so they're asking for fruit. They're not asking for apples, and they're not asking for oranges. They're talking about the 2 of them combined. So let's say this is the fruit type. Oh, there's 5. Okay, great. That's understanding that critical thinking skill is very valuable in AWS. They do a really good job of making sure that you know the product, you know the capabilities, and you know it across multiple dimensions. I respect AWS a lot for the time and effort that they've put into their certification process. They're very thoughtful about it. They've made it very hard, and I'm okay with that. I would much rather fail an exam, and then be able to show that I know that knowledge that well, because if I can just walk in and take an exam and just know it and be fine, then anybody can. And that's a huge challenge when I'm a company, right? I'm on this side too. We've got a company and we're trying to grow that.
So are there AWS exams you think people should maybe pay attention to?
Again, for me, it takes, it depends on the path. I would not invest a lot of time and effort going down a path that doesn't make sense for you. I would say if you're an infrastructure person and systems engineer, server engineer, I would take probably the SysOps admin exam. And then I would probably look at what do you want your specialization to be as a second or third tier on top of that? Do you want to be a networking person and really know AWS networking well? Or do you want to know security? Do you want to know a little bit about architecture and be a pro architect on top of that? So that second step is really going to determine what career path you want to choose down. If you're a developer, again, I would say understanding that the AWS Developer Associate exam is really critical. That's kind of table stakes in that. From that point of view, if I'm a DevOps person, I take them both. Take the two of them together, because there's a pro DevOps exam right on top of that builds on both of those bodies of knowledge to then prove that you have this third set over here of really valuable knowledge that you've learned over time. From the business, if I'm a business professional, and how do I make sure that I know my information? There is the AWS Practitioner Cert. I think everyone in a technical team should at least take the AWS Practitioner Certification if you're working with AWS. That is kind of, again, for our project managers, our engagement managers, heck, our COO, they're working with AWS enough that they have that certification. And they know that they can understand it when they're working on a project or they're working with a customer, and they hear that come back. So those would be the basics. I'm personally working towards the networking specialization and the security specialization on top of the recertification of my Pro Architect exam. I thought about the DevOps, probably, or might still give it a go by the end of the year. But really, that's the path that I'm going, is Pro Architect. I already have all three at the associate level. So I have DevOps or developer, SysOps, and associate architect. And I'm going to, now my second tier is going to be Pro Architect, and then either security and networking, one, the other, or both. So that's my personal path. And the cool part about doing it is sit down with, and you mentioned it, talk to your supervisor, talk to your superior, but I think sit down with your manager, your supervisor, someone who's going to help you figure out where you fit in the grand scheme of things, and put that path together and lay it out 6 months or a year out. Don't just sit down and go, I think I'm going to take AWS Pro Architect tomorrow. We have an engineer who sat down one day and said, I'm going to sit down and take the AWS Pro DevOps one day, and just sat down and took it without really laying out that path. How do I get there? How do I do these things? Didn't pass. And so understanding that step is, I think, the, how do I get there and where am I going? Where's my 1 year, my 6 month, my 1 year, and my 3 year are usually the horizons that I sit and look at. And what do I need to do in the next 6 months? What do I do by this time next year? And what do I want to not have to recertify for in 3 years?
Thank you for watching Stratum's Cloud Interrupted. If you like what you see, please subscribe, like, and share this video.